I'm Munir Mengal on behalf of Bolan Times. Today we are sitting in Geneva, United Nations. So our guest today is Dr. Lakhu Lohana. He is a Sindhi nationalist. He is a representative of human rights and he has been raising voices for the Sindhi people, for the Sindh from more than 10 years. So today we have a discussion with him with respect to the human rights issues of the Sindh people and the Sindh, what the people and the region is facing with respect to the human rights issue. I welcome you, Dr. Lakho. So my first question with respect to human rights issues, that what sorts of threats the Sindhi people or the people of the Sindh are facing while they are living inside the Sindh?
The case of the suffering of Sindhi people is as old as the creation of Pakistan. And what happened that when Pakistan was created, in spite of the wishes of Sindhi people, in spite of the role of Sindhi people in creating Pakistan, in fact, the migration occurred from Sindh, and Sindhi Hindus, who were the backbone of Sindhi middle class society, they were forced to leave. And then there is a huge, phenomenal struggle of Sindhi people for their human rights, for their emancipation, and for their democratic rights. Sai G.M. Syed was and is the leader of Sindhi national movement. Then Haider Bhai Jatoi, Qazi Faiz Muhammad, and there are hundreds of characters who raised the issue. And the Pakistani, Punjabi-dominated Pakistani establishment, anti-democratic establishment, they never recognized the rights of Sindhi people. Karachi was detached from Sindh, was made capital. A lot of people from migrating India, they were settled in the urban areas of Sindh. Then in 50s, there was this one unit that all the provinces, so-called provinces, which are nations, they were amalgamated into one unit, and the identity of Sindh was eliminated. Then there is Kotri Parish. Hundreds of thousands of lands were given either to military or people from Punjab. And therefore, within the Sindhi society, there was a huge resentment. And with the time, rather than resolving the issues of Sindhi people, the atrocities, the suffering of Sindhi people increased, and to the extent continued. And that we stand, Sindhis as a nation, stand at the historical stage where our existence is in real danger. And demographically, in the current sense, Sindhis are 60%. There's a huge number of influx of people from particularly Afanis and from other people, from Bengalis and Biharis and Burmese and all that. And so current situation, as a result, those people who raise the voices, there's a huge political mobilization. But what is happening that the people who raise the voice, either they are enforced, disappeared, and sent to the torture centers. Currently, still there are hundreds of Sindhi political activists and leaders, they are missing, and we don't know their whereabouts. And scores of Sindhi leaders and activists have been murdered, mutilated bodies, as is happening in Balochistan, same is happening in Sindh. and on 18th of February, body of leader of GSN nationalist organization, Saab Khan Goto, was found. He was kidnapped 4 days earlier from a court.
A very vocal voice for the Sindhi people. So the sufferings of the people, as per your opinion, are only because of the political difference. So what does it mean that the Sindhi people have not submitted themselves to the Pakistan or to the ideology of the Pakistan, or so what is the main issue?
The main issue, I mean, basically the manifestation of, because as I mentioned, that because the exploitation is to the extent that the Sindh, which produces 70% of the resources, that is, Sindhi people are one of the poorest in the country. Every institution is destroyed. We believe that Pakistan want to completely colonize and Sindh and Sindhi people, and therefore they are working on a multifaceted strategy. On one hand, they want to convert Sindhis into minority. They are bringing a lot of Afghanis and settling them into strategic locations, and we are seriously and genuinely worried that they will be used against the nationalist struggle of Sindhi people. A lot of madrasas are being opened so that the strength of Sindhi society, the secularism is under serious threat. The Sindhi indigenous population, Sindhi Hindus, they are being coerced and forced to migrate their motherland. Sindhi Hindu girls are being kidnapped and forced conversions and forcibly married. So the issue of enforced disappearances, extrajudicial killing, Talibanization of Sindh, and say currently what is happening, that probably the richest part of Sindh, which has got the largest, fifth largest gold deposit in the world. There's one of the worst drought, and to date more than 5 million people have been killed. And the governments, they remain aloof. They haven't done, they allowed, and they have now agreed that yes, it was their mistake. So people are dying because of starvation, and this is the attitude of the governments. And the Sindhi people, in the current situation, the suffering and the exploitation, they want to get rid of this exploitation and get emancipation.
So, Doctor, as you mentioned, that the elimination of the political workers, elimination of the human rights defenders, extrajudicial killings, and extrajudicial imprisonment of the people are being done. So, which institutions, which organizations are involved in such crimes, and whether they are doing it with impunity or any steps the government or its institutions has taken against those perpetrators who have been involved in such activities?
I mean, I think probably nobody has got any doubt that who's responsible for these atrocities. Of course, it is very clear, and everybody in Sindh knows about it, everybody in Pakistan knows about that. These are the intelligence agencies, the ISI and MI. And the situation of the institution, the government, they are so weak in front of these institutions, security establishment, even judiciary. They are unable to deliver, but there aren't two words about it, that who's behind it. And these are the security agencies, and they are carrying out without any impunity. And that's the reason that Sindhi people, they are rising, and Sindhi people are having a freedom march on 23rd of March in Karachi. Currently Sindhi people, they are having a freedom long march which started from one end of Sindh and ending in Karachi, the other end of Sindh. So there's a huge political mobilization against suffering, and of course the perpetrators behind these suffering and extrajudicial killings and imprisonment and systematic policies, even significant, more important, that the impacts of these exploitations not only restricted to the extrajudicial killing or disappearances, but this to punish the whole societies, Sindhi entire society is suffering. 50% Sindhi people, they live below poverty line. The 50% are primary school going children, they are not able to go to schools. There is more than 70%, 80% people, they don't have the drinkable water, and according to the basic international standards. So they are destroying the entire Sindhi society, so that they do not have a strength to fight against the designs of the colonization of the Punjabi establishment.
So, few months earlier, there was a statement by the Chief Minister, and then that was a statement by the government that Chinese language shall be implemented, particularly in Sindh, as a compulsory subject. So, what you think that is there any willing of the Sindhi people for accepting this, or it's just a strategic design which is going to be imposed on the Sindhi people for a specific purpose? So, is there any reservation with respect to that, or is a willingness of the Sindhi people?
I mean, the sad part of it is that even the Sindhi language, which is most developed language in terms of scripture, in terms of literature, in terms of writing and all that, and that is the only national language, because Urdu is not the language of any nation currently trapped in Pakistan, and even that is not taught in schools in urban areas at all. Even in the schools where the majority of school-going children are Sindhis, even they are not taught in Sindhi. For example, there are a number of NGOs, they are opening schools with the support from international aid like DFID and things like that. Even in areas where not a single child is not Sindhi, even they are forcing them to read in Urdu. And on top of it, if they are imposing China, because China of course has got a huge strategic interest in that region, and because the coastal area of Sindh and Balochistan is probably the most important strategic locations currently, in one of these, but one of the most important strategic locations in the world, and with the population of 1.2 billion, they want to capture these areas, and therefore they want to, the Sindh government, they want to please them, and so that they can come and they can invest, and therefore these governments who are fundamentally and deeply corrupt, and they are looking at these that they will probably get some booty out of it, so to please China and to allow them to come in, and the projects such as Zulfakarabad, the city that world has never seen of that size, and China want to, and if they say if the China will come, and the billions of dollars will come, and that will go into their pockets. They are fundamentally corrupt, and they are enemies of people. They allow the people to die as a result of drought. They don't care, and they want to remain in power. Therefore, they have to make these dramas and all these things. And the Sindhi people are not interested in any Chinese or any language. Not a single person would like to send their children to read Chinese, and if they impose, there will be a huge resistance to that.
In the local media, we saw that the civil society raised concerns, and then the nationalist political parties also raised concerns with this, by stating that the state is going to make the Sindh land a breeding land for the Taliban and other fundamental forces. So, do you see, is there any visibility in this, that the state or other organizations, they are for a purpose bringing the Taliban and other fundamental forces to the Sindh land, and what is the aim and objective behind that? Does all this, pose a threat to the civil society, to the Sindh people? So, how you see, how you analyze this?
It is not, if I see or civil society sees it, or national parties see it, it is so obvious And for example, I give you a few examples. In Sindh, currently there are 12,400 something, so more than 12,000 religious schools which are called madrasas. And every year, hundreds of new madrasas are being opened. And for example, previously the largest Pathan city is not Peshawar, the largest Pathan city is Karachi. And it is mainly due to the Afghani immigrants. And currently what is happening, a new phenomenon has emerged, and which is now quite visible, that these Afghanis are being settled in all areas of wherever they go. They just create a madrasa and they take the land, because it's vacant land. Nobody asked them and that they shouldn't take that land. And for example, in last couple of months alone, there have been 2,000 new Afghanis sitting at a strategic location in Hyderabad, which we call Ganjo Takar. If you go on Ganjo Takar, you can see the whole of Hyderabad. But not only that, they are moving fast. For example, in Manjand, in Meher, small towns, far, basically very small towns, and hundreds of Afghanis just are going there. Outside the towns and villages, there are open lands. They just take the land, make their temporary residences. So they are really moving quite a large number of Afghani people. And what happened that when people, the important phenomenon is to say, for example, Hyderabad, when people had like a protest demonstration against these Afghanis, they all came with their batons and then hidden weapons. So it is not something people see it or not, and that's a huge threat to not only, number one, two aspects, that Sindhi people, the demography of Sindh, which is already really very sensitive, and bringing a large population, and will change that demography further. Secondly, these are religiously very extreme and fundamentalist people, and many of them will be Taliban, who will be ready to behead people in the name of religion. And that is a great threat to Sindh's demography, to Sindhi people's right on their motherland, and to the Sindhi people's secular philosophy. And it has become so obvious, and that cannot take place without the support and patronization and sponsorship of the ruling establishment. That cannot happen.
Dr. Sahib, you have been struggling for the Sindhi people rights for more than a decade. So you have been visiting this place, particularly United Nations, from more than 10 years. So what's the response of the international community? What's the response of the international organizations, particularly with respect to the human rights issues of the Sindhi people?
There are two aspects of it. Number one, that whenever you talk to United Nations and human rights organizations, they are really very receptive, and they understand our issues. They understand our suffering. As far as the action goes, and unfortunately, some people say that UN is an organization and without teeth. So they cannot really, they can write to the governments and they can say that this is happening about the extrajudicial killing, against the disappearances, against the violence against religious minorities. But because the establishment that rules Pakistan is a fascist establishment, and in many cases, and the calls from the UN, the calls from the human rights organizations, and go unheard. So the action and that should result, and from the calls of the international community, is really not as effective as we hope or we expect. And what should happen to protect these vulnerable nations and vulnerable communities? So that is the sad situation, and the international community has to think about that, how they can really, that's a very important question, that how to save these vulnerable people, say for example in Sindh and Balochistan, and the extrajudicial killings are at maximum, and there need to be something more effective, and probably, and the institutions which can really impose sanctions, they at this stage they are not probably ready. Like, say for example, there were sanctions in case of Libya, for example. There are some sanctions against Iran, for example. There are sanctions again against probably there will be some sanctions against Syria, and similar sanctions, because the level of the violations of human rights and committed by Pakistan is so huge that it requires a firm commitment and firm hand from the international community, which to date and it has not been as effective as we, the dying people, have expected.
So particularly this movement on 25th Council session of the human rights, so what message you want to deliver, what requests you want to make, and what sort of demands you make from these organizations, particularly from the United Nations and the Human Rights Council, Human Rights Commissioner, that they shall take into consideration for the Sindh or for the Sindhi people?
I think the most important thing that they can do, that as a minimum they should send a UN commission to Pakistan to investigate the violations of human rights. Once these violations, because okay, we are saying that these are violations, and not only we are saying, literally all the international human rights organizations like Amnesty, like Human Rights Watch, like Asian Human Rights Commission, and even last time there was a commission from UN of extrajudicial killing group. They went to Pakistan, and but they either they weren't giving full access to the situation, because the interaction is really very important, rather than to engage with the official sources only and very limited sources. And of course they've got their limitations, and but they need to talk to the real people, the representative of the Sindhi and Baloch people on the ground. And the United Nations have to send a commission, and at least to bring a full picture, full assessment of the human rights violations against the institutions involved in it, confirmation of that, and submit to the United Nations Security Council that there need to be some action, basically, because people needn't to die needlessly, and because of course there are international situations and international scenarios, the political interests of different countries are different, but at the end of the day, it is not only the issue of the suffering of Sindhi and Baloch people. We honestly believe that Pakistan is emerging and as a real monster, and the entire world has to pay the price, and as a first line of defense, the Sindhis and Balochs are being massacred, but once that line is crossed, the next line will be the entire world. So this monster needs to be stopped now and before it becomes too late.
With this message, a very realistic message and a very realistic demand from the Human Rights Commissioner, that Human Rights Commission shall send a fact-finding mission or commission to analyze the human rights issues and situation in Sindh. I'm thankful to you, and I'm very much thankful to you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.